You know, I've been in relationships where they said, well, I didn't know anything was wrong because you just always seem okay. Mm-hmm. So I'm constantly torn between like, should I show more of my emotions on my sleeve or should I continue to roll with the punches? And I think that the answer is it depends. You know, like there's times where you need to say exactly how you're feeling. And at the same time, in certain situations, you need to be able to think extremely logically. What's up, y'all? Cody Allen here. Welcome to another episode of the Fill the Gap podcast. I got my buddy John Torres here. We have done now two. I've had only two. You're my second guest ever. I don't know if you remember Miles Williams. No. Went to Windsor High. But so John's on for episode number 2. We only record 30-minute episodes, and John has so much shit to say that I didn't let him say last time. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, all right, we got to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
John lives in Puerto Rico, so it's only every so often that he's in the right time zone to do these podcasts. So before we jump in, this podcast is sponsored by CutsClothing. That's why I make everybody wear CutsClothing when they come on. Actually, I need to have the guys send me some women's clothes, because if I have a woman on, I don't want to be like, you got to wear my shirt or anything weird like that. But you guys, CutsClothing makes the best men's and women's for the sport of business clothes. We call it work attire. Work casual, something that you can wear on your way to work in the morning all the way through happy hour in the evening. So use code #CodyAllen and you can get 15% off anything you guys order from there, men's and women's. So thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me.
As I said, or I've talked about before, today I kind of want to talk about what it's like to be a man in today's society, and less of being a man and more so what it's like to be masculine and also have insecurities and also have to perform and also have to reinvent yourself and also have to be all these sort of things in today's society, and kind of how it correlates to growing up playing football, because I know that is considered like the hyper masculine sport, and I've talked about it before, but how being the biggest, strongest, fastest, best looking, most promiscuous, like that's like when you're in high school, when you're in college, and even into your later 20s, people view masculinity. And I think it's kind of just changed. So I kind of want your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think my definition of masculinity has changed over the past even couple years. I think that I'm starting to delete a lot of the ideas that I had.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Facebook posts.
A lot of the ideas.
Delete my Facebook posts.
About what it means to be a man and how you show that, especially to another partner. And you talked about insecurities, which I think is a good point, because everybody has insecurities. And I had somebody that in my last relationship, they said they couldn't be with me because they saw insecurities they didn't like, or insecurities in me. But the reason they saw that is because I was able to be vulnerable enough to show those insecurities and maybe even voice them, because I was expecting them to help me grow in that aspect. So for somebody to say that to you, it kind of debilitates you as a man. So It's important to know when to be vulnerable and to who you're vulnerable to.
Yeah, because you made a point and you said that you showed your vulnerabilities and you even talked about them with your ex or somebody that you're in a relationship with, and they told you that they didn't like those vulnerabilities.
Right.
And I would go as far to say, and I've talked about this with my girlfriend, where she appreciates then when I wear pink shirts. She appreciates when I'm more vulnerable and talk about my vulnerabilities, but you could say that your partner might not like the way that you act about some of those vulnerabilities. I'll give you an example, right? So I could be not confident about the way that I look. That's been like an issue for me in the past, right? Not confident about the way that I look. And then that could come off as jealousy, because maybe I've never had really an issue with jealousy, but this could be an example, like where if I don't feel good about the way that I look, now I feel like you are trying to get the attention of another guy. The person that you're talking about might have rather said, it's not that they dislike your vulnerabilities, but they don't like how you act upon them. And for me, and things that I faced in my relationship and things I faced in just life in general, is more so along the lines of how am I having healthy coping mechanisms? Am I having healthy ways to convey my message in the way that I'm feeling to my partners? You know, I think that's very true in most things, business relationships, personal relationships, the game of football, you know. It's just that football, we were kind of taught like, all right, you don't want to look like a bitch, go fuck that guy up.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Which doesn't really work.
Create pain,
no.
as much pain as you can.
Yeah, it shouldn't work in today's society. You know, you got people getting in fights at fucking 40 years old is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that we need to be more accepting of people's vulnerabilities and be more understanding of they need to find healthy ways to cope with kind of maybe sometimes the being scared of like being vulnerable with somebody and almost being hurt, you know?
Yeah, and you could argue that insecurities never really go away, right? You just learn how to deal with them better and understand what triggers those insecurities.
Yeah, like I had therapy today. So this is like therapy number 2 for me.
Yeah.
And my therapist said, you know, it's important that if you are particularly insecure about something, it's extremely important in your relationships, romantic and non-romantic, that you at least let the person in on what might trigger those insecurities. So like for a lot of men, it's okay to have a healthy amount of like ego, if you will, right? Because it breeds competition, it breeds bettering yourself and whatnot. But there are sometimes the smallest statement can really bruise that ego, you know? And while it seems insignificant to the other person, to me, it could have fucked me up, you know?
We just talked about how fragile the man's ego is, and it doesn't take much to take you over the edge, especially if you pride yourself in, say, being an athlete or being a businessman, CEO, and somebody who you care about can say 1 or 2 things that could really put you into the ground. And I don't think a lot of people realize that, so it's easy to make comments that can trigger something in you.
You know, I've been in relationships where they said, well, I didn't know anything was wrong because you just always seem okay. And
you do.
right. And that's, so I'm constantly torn between like, should I show more of my emotions on my sleeve, or should I continue to roll with the punches and like let everything know that it's going to be okay? And I think that the answer is it depends. You know, like there's times where it's like you need to say exactly how you're feeling and you need to act emotionally, but emotionally intelligent. And at the same time, in certain situations, you need to be able to think extremely logically, you know, and you say like, all right, I'm not going to let this overtake my thoughts and consume me, you know, and maybe make me act erratically. So there are certain things that you can bury. There are certain things that need to be fleshed out and talked about in the moment. I think it all boils down to just communication. You have a ton of like employees, right? And so you know that, I think you told me about this like earlier in the week or last week. You said it's crazy like managing so many people and understanding how each person's personality is different, and you have to manage them differently. You know, not one managing style works for the same person.
And you're right. And how things get interpreted too, the way you communicate with your employees is important, because you might think you're being really clear,
right,
but you weren't. And I've gone back and checked like old emails and messages, and I realized like I wasn't clear at all. So the fact that they made a mistake or they did something wrong, it's not their fault, but it's maybe my communication style. And sometimes some employees that have been with me for years, they understand how I communicate, so they can pick apart what I said and just do what they understand because they know me. But others can't do that. So
it's crazy because you can say anything however the hell you meant to say it, you know? And it doesn't really matter, because all this matters is how it's perceived on the other end, right? So I could sit here and tell you, be like, hey, John, like, I'm trying to have a really meaningful conversation with you. And in your head, you could be like, this dude's blowing smoke up my ass the whole time. And that's your truth, and this is my truth. And so, I heard it like I think it was like when I was working in banking, my manager said, this is in sales, but it's very true of most conversations. There's always like 3 conversations that are happening. There's the one we're having out loud, There's the one that I'm interpreting in my head, and there's one that you're interpreting in your head, right? And that's like when you're trying to sell somebody something and they're thinking that you're trying to display something else. But at the same time, just in any sort of conversation, you know, especially when you're talking about feelings, when you're talking about emotions, because how much does it suck when you're trying to be vulnerable with somebody, or you're trying to even talk about something with like meaning and conviction, and the other person on the other end you feel is just like super inauthentic. You're like, all right, man.
Well, one of the issues I think too is that you have two people, especially as you said, in a relationship, and you both have your truths, and you're trying to communicate that, and you both might be right about what you're talking about, and in the conversation it breaks down, and it could sound like a personal attack on the other person. So then a conversation that should be moving you forward turns into an argument, which then takes you back the other way.
It's just so fucking hard.
It's so hard. It's so hard to manage. So that's why it's important to find the right person who you can communicate with, and they can be empathetic to how you feel without feeling attacked, and vice versa.
Right. So I've had conversations with my therapist about past relationships where I basically was like, one of the things that I didn't realize that I needed was sometimes I need someone to tell me that what I'm doing is good enough or I'm doing the right thing, because a lot of like the way that I operate, and maybe other men operate, is we like to provide, right? In some capacity, whether it be financially, emotionally, like physically, whatever the hell it might be, right? Sexually. And so I don't necessarily need someone to tell me that I am doing that for them. But if you have somebody that is telling you that you're not doing it, then it's just conflicting on what you actually need. And I think that's why they talk about like love languages and whatnot, because that doesn't make the other person a bad person. It's just that's their personality trait or whatnot. And it all really boils down to, if you haven't told them what you need, then how the fuck are they supposed to know? You know? So you can't get mad at the person because they're not taking you on enough dates when you don't tell them that you like to go on dates. All you do is go on Instagram and see girls going to Greece and fucking Applebee's and where every date in between, and get mad, and then passively aggressively take it out on your boyfriend or husband or whatever.
Yeah, no, humans would be great if we didn't have emotions.
It's just very interesting to see, because you also get caught in the idea of, because people date, right? The success rate of dating is like 0.0000001%, right? Of anybody who's ever gotten in a date. It depends on what you see as success, but if your version of success is like being married, people date like 40 people in their lifetime before they find the person they're going to marry, right?
Right.
Especially in today's age. Sometimes people date like hundreds of people. So when you look at all these relationships that you've been in or people have been in, you're like, when do you know to call it quits, or when do you know that it's time to either make the adjustments that you need to make it work, or to move on to something else? And I speak on that from like a football aspect too, because it's like, all right, all of our careers come to an end, right?
Right.
And your career really only comes to an end when you're not willing to put in the work to go to the next level, right?
Right. And that's a tough one for me, man, knowing when to stop. And especially as someone who goes to therapy on a weekly basis, I feel like it's made me so empathetic to the point where I try to look past bad traits, because I think I can work through it with them, where I could overcome whatever it is that's bothering me or her. So that's a tough one for me to figure out when to throw in the towel and say, this is enough is enough.
And I think it's on a case-by-case basis, right? And it depends on what is kind of going on in your guys' relationship in life. Because if, I don't know, if somebody just kind of bothers you sometime, but there's a massive amount of upside and you share so many, like you check a lot of boxes, right? Check a lot of boxes, but she, I don't know, fucked your best friend.
Yeah. What are you trying to say, Cody?
Right. Is that something you're willing to look past, maybe some of your insecurities around like your girlfriend dating people that you know or something like that, right? And then conversely, let's say that you check a lot of boxes for her, but you just aren't really driven. So is it something that's you're willing to work with them on their own growth in that particular situation? Is she going to work with you in order to make sure that you guys can continue to check all of the boxes, right? I guess nobody's going to ever check all the boxes. You know what I mean?
I think that's the key, is that the other person's willing to put in the work, because you're both making an investment, right?
Yeah.
And time is so valuable nowadays. So if the other person's not willing to put in work with you, then why continue? I think that's a good signal of when to throw in the towel, is how dedicated the other person is to making things work, despite having maybe certain differences.
Okay, yeah. So I'm a firm believer in that too. And I've probably been with people for I've probably been with people for too long, based on what I thought our relationship could be, or based on the fact that I didn't want to hurt them, and I ended up hurting them in the long run, because you like end up talking to other people, if you stay in a relationship for too long. But on the flip side of that, I firmly believe that as long as both people are willing to work on it, that's when it's going to work. But let's say that one person fucks up, right? Let's say that she cheats on you, I cheat on her, you cheat on her, whatever it is. Often you see that one side is willing to say, hey, you need to make up for what you did to me. So one side kind of checks out. I'm not going to drive over to your house anymore because I think that you fucked up. So I gotta, basically like you're playing catch up, right? So I don't know if you've had experience with that. I don't know if you've like talked to anybody about that, but like that's a very real thing. You're fine, John. That's like a very real thing too, Is that right? I don't know. I don't think so. But at the same time, when someone gets hurt or somebody feels like they've been wronged, they're a lot less willing to put in work on the relationship.
It's just so much harder when you're hurt, because it's hard to communicate your feelings without pointing fingers, because you're hurt. And then if the other person feels blame, then you're already at a point where you can't grow. And then at that point, you would need some sort of mediator or, therapist to help you get through those feelings.
Yeah, because you got to be able to talk about it, right? Because you can't just sit here and be like, well, I'm hurt, so I'm done putting in the effort until you show me that I'm not going to be hurt anymore, Right. I don't know. I feel like a lot of people have been in these situations before where it's like, it's just easier to quit than it is to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
especially if you like to quit. I mean, I like to put in time and actually feel like, okay, this is never going to go anywhere before I throw in the towel. But I haven't been in that many long-term relationships, so it's hard for me to say.
I guess why the fuck are we talking about this? The biggest reason to talk about this is that this isn't just about like romantic relationship. This is about when you feel like you needed to be vulnerable with a coach that did you dirty, right? Or you didn't hold up your end of the deal with your teammates, or a coach that you needed to really put in the work to be successful in your capacity in your sport. But there's always that shoulda, coulda, woulda, and one that got away, right? I'd always be like, oh man, like if I would have just went to Newman, I would have won state, right? There's always that pipe dream, How do you feel about the one? Do you think that there's a one that got away for everybody when it comes to like relationships?
It definitely feels like that, but I don't think so. I think there's a lot of people that are compatible for you at every stage of your life. So
yeah.
Because I'm so much different than I was when I was 19. But when I was 19, I thought I had the person that got away. Yeah. Even though that person probably hate me now, or vice versa,
Yeah, and you'd probably hate yourself. You wouldn't hang out yourself as 19,
Right. I just feel like I was so much different.
And that's also an interesting topic because you got to think about. There's people who start dating in high school. And they will remain married throughout their entire life and have the best relationship. That's their best friend because they continue to grow together.
Right.
There are situations I see where people start dating young, or they start dating old, or they start dating in their 20s. It doesn't really matter. But for whatever reason, they start to grow in different directions. And that's when it kind of gets hard to cut your losses or cut your ties. And I think I'll just throw out an example. Like, right, we meet in our late 20s. I'm working a dead-end job, you're kind of working a job that you like, and I figure out, you know what, like, hey, I finally want to go to school to be like a fucking nurse or something, right? Or she wants to go to school to be a nurse, and no gender roles here. And and I'm really working hard to better myself, and maybe she just isn't on the same path. Maybe she's just super okay with living this, like, I won't say mediocre life, but just like more simple life. But I'm like, I really want to make more money. I want to move to a better part of the state or better state or whatever. At that point, or I get into really passionate about self-development and growth and reading books, and you start losing things that you had in common with your significant other, because it happens with friends all the time, right?
Right.
It's kind of unrealistic to think that it doesn't happen with your partner.
Right. That's why you say this is not just about romantic relationships, but also, yeah. This is why I value our friendship so much, because we've been through so many facets of our lives, and we're still yet able to be connected and friendly with each other.
That's funny, because like, very often you ask somebody like, are you friends with like your best friend from high school anymore? Mm-hmm. Like, you might be friends with them, but you're not best friends with them because you've kind of like gone on different paths. Mm-hmm. Or are you best friends with your best friend from college, right? You kind of gone on different paths. But sometimes in relationships, people get into romantic relationships, and even if they continue to go on different paths and growing apart from each other, rather than not being together anymore, they kind of just drift apart from each other, and they're kind of two separate people, like living separate lives, you know? It's, I guess I didn't realize how prevalent that was in non-romantic relationships, that it makes sense that it's very prevalent in regular romantic relationships, but people just stick it out.
And then there's so many other variables, like, you know, sexual desire, and after a certain period, you might not be as attracted to your partner as you were before, so you have to both try to make things work. I have a friend who's dating someone who, she says her boyfriend doesn't pleasure her anymore, doesn't know how to, or doesn't know how to hit the right spots. So he's not willing to learn or put in any work, so she's like basically done with the relationship.
Did he know how to before and now he doesn't?
No, it was never.
Just never.
He was never good at that.
Right.
In her eyes, but she's willing to work at it and maybe help him get through it.
Right. So he checked a lot of other boxes.
Exactly.
And if there are boxes, and sex is extremely important in relationships, if there are particular boxes that are non-negotiables, right? Like, maybe it's faith, maybe it's you have to be sexually compatible, maybe it's political views, whatever the hell it is, right? How long are you willing to work with that person on that, right? How long are you willing to put up with that? I guess it depends on how good they are outside of that. Or how good you are, or how good you see yourself are. Because like, if you don't got a lot of options, if you don't got a lot of options, you might have to ride that one out until he figures this shit out.
That's true. Sometimes you have to look at yourself and think, what am I doing wrong here?
Exactly.
Maybe I'm the problem.
Yeah, we've always looked at that person and we're like, man, why the fuck are they together? And then you're like, all right, well, maybe he's not good at X, Y, and Z, you know? And that is something that's also to be said. There always was this saying, is that a man is only as good as his options, right? When it comes like being in monogamous relationships. That's obviously been proven to be false in a lot of ways. When you look at, like, I don't know, Tim Tebow, for example. Tim Tebow's been with one girl his entire life. Like, he's dated a few women, but he's slept with one because it's who he lost his virginity to, and he's married to her, whatever. Tim Tebow was the most popular person in college football when we were in high school. So he's had a good looking dude, you know? He's had every option available to him. And so it's just interesting to see what people hold value in, because sometimes options don't mean shit. Sometimes options really make you think, like, because you could have everything, you'd much more value one, you know? But to your point before, it kind of goes through like seasons of life, you know, like when you're 21, you're like, oh my God, so many girls like me.
Right.
Now you're 31, you're like, I just wish one person would put up with my shit. You know? Yeah, man, it's super interesting. It can wear on you if you I'm an overthinker. I think that I know you're an overthinker.
100%. Yeah. I'm super cautious too, and I try to do things right, and I think sometimes that hinders me from just taking a chance or just trying to make things work without overthinking it.
Yeah, they say like what, paralysis by analysis?
I have some of that, I think.
Yeah. In certain things, like maybe when it comes to business decisions, you fucking go. You're very confident in your decision making. Maybe relationships, you're more like, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong?
Yeah, I just think I've seen so many relationships that haven't worked, specifically my parents, and growing up in a household where there was a lot of arguing and sometimes got a little physical. I'm always really cautious, and I don't want it to get to that point.
Right. What do they say? It's like modeling or whatever. Seeing seeing relationships happen in front of you. And my parents were divorced. I just talked to my mom about this. I was with her yesterday because it was my dad's birthday 2 days ago.
You have a dad?
I texted him.
Right.
I texted him happy birthday 2 days ago. Like, kind of like.
Did he respond?
Yes, he texted me back yesterday. I texted him happy birthday and he texted me back. He was like, thanks. How you doing? This isn't just idle chit chat. I'm genuinely concerned.
Oh, yeah, that's what he said?
Yeah.
Huh.
I didn't text him back. But it's just, you brought up parents, and it's crazy because I know growing up, you hold your parents in such a high regard without thinking that they're human. Mm-hmm. And then you get a little older and maybe you become a parent, or you just see some of their mistakes and some of the things that make them human. And sometimes it crushes you, but sometimes it makes you appreciate them even more because you're like, fuck, man, you were going through some shit trying to raise me.
Right. You understand, like, especially for me, as I started becoming a man, I'm able to forgive my dad for so much pain because I feel like I'm able to understand it more and some of the reasons behind why he did certain things.
Yeah, like I can talk about like I can't speak on your dad, but I can talk about like my dad. Like my dad was 29 when he had me, and he wasn't ready to be married. He wasn't ready to be a father. He was actually already a father. He lied to my mom about that. And he was already married to my mom for a few years before he had me. He made a lot of decisions that he shouldn't have, right? That he wasn't ready to do, because now I look at it in my shoes and I was like, fuck, man, if I put myself into his shoes, a lot of the shit that he was going through in life, there's no way that would be a good idea. Right. Like if you had a boy who was like kind of wasting his money, kind of fucking a lot of girls, kind of had a drug problem and liked to party, and then he's like, I'm going to get married and have a kid. You'd be like, don't do that. Please don't do that, you know?
Right.
But we look at our parents and we're like, how could you have left? And I'm like, I mean, I get it. You
start getting it, and I think that's why I'm so cautious, especially in relationships, because I don't want that for myself. I don't want to end up in a relationship like my parents had, so I'm always trying to, facilitate, play my cards right with the other person, and sometimes to my own detriment.
Right, because sometimes it's not about playing your cards right. Sometimes it's just about doing what feels right.
Exactly, yeah.
I don't know. Relationships are fucking tough, man, but
they're hard. There's too many variables.
I know.
I don't understand how people get into relationships like one after the other, and
that's a whole other codependency issue. And I don't know. I'm not a therapist,
Yeah, I've been on my own for a long time. I'm very comfortable with that.
Yeah. There's also, and sorry to cut you off, there's also being alone for so long that you're like, man, I am so comfortable right now. Like, I don't really want to fuck that up.
Yes, and I'm going through that right now in a way where I met someone and I feel like I'm becoming codependent because I like being around them, talking to them, and now I don't want to be alone. But that's a different conversation.
Yeah. Well, shit, man, we're running up on 30 minutes. I love talking about this stuff, your feelings, wearing pink shirts.
Yeah.
But yeah, let us know where we can find you, and we'll get you on, obviously, as many of these as we can.
Instagram, Real John Torres, or johntorres.com, my personal website, blog. If you're interested in marketing, hit me up.
We're talking about your feelings.
We're talking about my feelings.
All right, guys, you guys know the code. It's the Cody Allen for CutsClothing, and that's that.